Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Almost Famous Magazine and our special guest today, the one, the only, the extraordinary Nic Collins. Glad you could make it today, Nic.
Thank you so much, man. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's been a little time in the works, but now we got some really exciting stuff to talk about. And I know I'm excited about it because from what I've heard, you've got a great thing going. But let's address kind of the elephant in the room to start. You can't trust what you see on the internet, right? You got to be real careful. So I just want to get this out of the way. There's this rumor that you and your partner Trevor have these kind of famous musician dads. Like, how does that play into how you two came together, and what's the impetus for that relationship and how it became the effect?
Yeah, I mean that's true. My dad is Phil Collins, and his dad is Steve Lukather from Toto, and yeah, I mean it's been a bit of a kind of crazy process the last kind of just over a year, I guess. Lee Sklar and Amy Keys, who both played in my dad's solo band as well as in Toto at various points. Um, they had been telling Trev and I that, like, man, you guys got to get together. You guys really get along. Whatever. And we followed each other on like Instagram on social media, but it wasn't. We'd never met in person. And then he happened to be in Miami, like in January of 2023, and basically like he was there to shoot some sort of like TV program, and something went south, and so he was like, well, I'm in Miami, who do I know? And so he hit me up, he's like, hey, you're down to grab dinner? And we did. It was like a bit of a double day. It was me and my girlfriend Isabella, and then him and his wife Madison, and we just really hit it off. We just hung the whole night and had dinner, and we kind of realized we had just so much in common, like, and almost at points felt like we'd lived parallel lives. It was really strange, like lots of things that had happened to both of us. And it's one of those things when obviously coming from like my background with who my dad is, like, you're kind of exposed to people in a similar position throughout your life, and a lot of the time it's like they're one of two ways. They're either really cool and they get it, or they really don't, and it's like a totally different type of approach to it. Like, my dad always raised me to be really kind of grounded and very normal in every sense of the word, and that's kind of was the same with Trev. So we just really got along. But he does a lot of production work. He's a very good producer, and that's kind of where I thought we were going to be working together, was just like I'd do something on a session for him, and that was kind of what we had established. But then fast forward a couple months, I was on the road with Mike and the Mechanics, and I get a text from Trev being like, hey, dude, I'm thinking of putting a group together, and what are you thinking? What do you think? And I was like, I don't know. What do you have in mind? Like, what's the music? And he sent me the guitar riff to Unwanted, which ended up being the first song we put out. And I was like, yeah, dude, I'm in. And an experiment kind of turned into a full band. The more we kind of wrote together and realized that we were doing like something kind of cool and unique that we were digging. And it's just kind of ever since then. That was like probably in the summer of 2023, and then we wrapped the entire album by the end of the year, and have been playing some shows. So, and we've got a lot of stuff planned for this year. So it's just been a bit of a whirlwind, like how fast everything has just kind of developed.
Kind of almost like a happy accident encounter, right?
Pretty much, yeah. It was like, very quick, and a lot of pieces fitting at a particular time, and schedules being available. That's just kind of what it was.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on an experiment. I was going to follow up with a question about it. Feels like an amazing chemistry experiment, right? You get all these elements together, to make something that's compounded. With the three singles you've released so far, it feels so tight as a organized band that you wouldn't say to yourself, well, a year ago it was just some, odd musicians who hadn't really played with one another. You congealed really quickly. Tell me a little
For
bit how that,
sure.
that happened.
Yeah, for sure. It's been really kind of weird. I mean, the crazy thing is we never had a conversation about what kind of band we wanted to be, or what like bands we kind of wanted to emulate, or what genre we were going to be. It was literally just like, Trev, Unwanted was different because I was on tour, so I didn't get to write my parts and really record them till the end. But usually the way we work is Trev like will send me a blank, a guitar idea where he maps out the whole song, and I kind of have free reign to create whatever I want on top of that. And then we'll bounce notes off of each other once I've got some sort of a demo that I am cool with. And that was kind of just how it started, and we never talked about it. It was just like that was my reaction to his riffs, and then his guitar work after the fact was a reaction to my drum parts, and he would go and refine whatever he had in mind. And then Steve Majora on keyboards and Emmett staying on vocals, the same thing. It was a very, you know one step at a time. Everybody was doing something after the person had finished. It was never like all of us in the same room. I mean, the first 3 tunes we wrote, you know we had mixed and finished all of them without ever being in the same room together, which was just really weird. It was kind of a bit of a COVID vibe. You know what I mean? Like everybody's isolated and doing their own thing, but it's just because we don't
Post
all
COVID.
like Trev lives in LA, and that's kind of where the band is based, but none of us live in LA. I live in Miami, Florida. Emmett lives in Vegas, and then Steve lives in NorCal. And so it was just one of those things where the chemistry kind of was there. I think also like every band member kind of after a couple tunes kind of started to figure out what the band's shtick was, if you like to me, I look at it, it's a rock band making pop tunes, and that's kind of what I started to gather the more we wrote. And the songs that we have out now are kind of a solid representation of the spectrum of music that the band covers, although we haven't released like one of the softer, more ballady, I wouldn't say ballad, but more of, the more chill, softer tunes yet. But the cool thing is that, I'd say Unwanted's probably right down the middle of the spectrum, and then it goes heavier and softer from there. So it was fun to like put the record together. Trev produced the record and the band, and he really approaches it always with a mindset, for this album at least, was like, let's write 10 singles, as opposed to 3 singles and a bunch of filler. So it was a different kind of approach to it. And for me as a drummer, navigating what works with the band and what doesn't, what isn't, what is appropriate and what isn't appropriate. It was a learning process throughout the end. But the cool thing is, since we just wrote it, we didn't write the record and then record it. It was being done simultaneously over the course of a couple months, that by the end we had really dialed it in. It was like you kind of learned from the last song every single time.
So it's kind of like separate yet together, right? I mean, it really, that is an amazing story, because most musicians want that feel that, you get in the room, you get the vibe of the room, the sound, the feeling of other musicians. And to do it that way is really incredible. And especially, the sound. I've played your singles so far for some friends of kind of all musical genre likes and ages and stuff. And they're like, wow, someone was like, wow, I how did I miss this? It's got such an 80s feel to it. And then someone's like, well, but it's rocking out like early 2000s. How did you guys decide to bring the sound together? Because it feels brand new and but yet comfortable at the same time. And what were the influences around that texture?
Yeah, it's interesting because we're only kind of really figuring out each other's influences the more we get to know each other. I'd say that definitely, there was a pop sensibility, especially in Trev's writing. And I know when Trev and Emmett get together to write like the vocal top line and stuff, like there is that pop sensibility that you want it to be accessible. The great thing about the band is that a lot of things were so different to what I've experienced that I kind of leaned into like why it was so different. And that's kind of what I liked from it. Trev, guitar wise, is such a unique tone and very creative on the instrument that like he definitely has those heavy influences as well, just as much as he's influenced by the pop thing and as a producer. But he also, even it wasn't until like a couple weeks ago where we were hanging out and like we're like bonding over these bands, like, you listen to Slipknot? Like I'm like, you know what I mean? Like stuff like that, where it's like you definitely actually get, especially in his writing, you get the influence from the 2000s rock scene and then, the 90s influence. And then for me as a drummer, I kind of bring in, what I do, which, as much as it's like it's always doing what's right for the song, I also kind of approach it with a bit more of a prog mindset and trying to like, okay, well, within the confines of what's appropriate for the tune, like, can I do something that's interesting and unique to me that, that I think can be different? and then obviously, Steve with his keyboards, he kind of, I think he probably makes the band, he brings the more accessible, bit more accessibility to it with his kind of catchy synth lines. And then Emmett, as a singer, I mean, he's just an absolute monster. Not only is he like extremely well trained and can sing for hours and not damage his vocal, but like he's got his vocal cords rather, but he's got this huge range of like, he can go and do like the really heavy rock, almost Chris Cornell thing, but then he can go and do like an Adam Levine pop vocal. It's really impressive. And, I think at the end of the day, everybody's got a lot of experience in, touring with other people or whatever it is, that everybody kind of tries to bring their A game to it. So there is that trust there that everybody's bringing their best to the song. But, at the same time, the influences are really just what the four of us sound like together. It's never like us trying to do something. I consider it a pop rock band, but it's also kind of hard rock sometimes. It's really strange. But yeah, definitely, as far as like us kind of creating that, getting that chemistry together, it's just been over time, like the more songs we write, and Trev getting into like more what I do and me getting into more what he does. Like the songs that we wrote near the end of the record are more dialed into each other than at the beginning, but they still kind of really sound cohesive. And as far as like the 80s thing that you mentioned, it's really funny because we've had a couple people say that too. And I think obviously with our dads coming from that generation, like there's definitely that influence in it. But I think also a big thing, I think it just hasn't been since the 80s that there's been catchy rock songs. You know what I mean? Like that are like more radio friendly. Because I think now we live in a world where everything is so genre separated that like, oh, if you do metal, this is what you do, and if you do rock, this is what you do. And I think it's funny, like, I think hearing synths in a rock context adds to the 80s feel. But I also think like, you look back at the bands like, like Toto or Genesis or Journey or, these 80s bands where they were rocking, but they still had like a hook and they were still going to be played, they could be played on the radio. And I think it's just hasn't been that since. So a lot of people go directly to like the 80s and comparing us to it. But, it's an honor. I mean, we love that music, but I think there's definitely a huge scope of inspiration that's coming from all over, musically.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I played it for one person and they're like, is this a Bad English song? Like, and I'm like, I stopped and thought, I'm like, Bad English went from this hard rocking stuff on the rock charts to, I can see you smile on the adult contemporary chart, and it was all over the place, but it worked, and it had this sound and flavor, and that's what people have been telling me is it just immediately feel good. Sometimes you have to warm yourself up to songs and music. They're just it feels really natural. And
Thank you, man.
let me ask you this: you've hit on the writing piece. You kind of popped pieces off of one another. Were you at this stage of the game able to feel comfortable enough with each other to not just stay in your swim lane, so to say, like you on drums, right? Were you all able to like say, hey, maybe try this or try that to make it a fully collaborative effort that way?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Like overall, the album is 100%. It was a co-written record between the four of us. It's not like it wasn't kind of a John and Paul situation, and then everybody else just kind of follows the instructions. It was very much everybody was involved, and I think at the beginning I was responding to the music, but then as Trev would send me more stuff, I would hear something. It started off with like double kick, which like Something Wrong has a pretty basic double kick part. But that was something that I threw out there, and I was like, well, let's see where this lands. It was like the cool thing about writing each person at a time, and it was that like it kind of let everybody finish their thought first before somebody else goes and like attacks it and gets, because when you're writing, it can get territorial, and especially in a room, and some bands like that. I think with this band, it helped that everybody could just do what they wanted to do, and then like for drums, like I would lay my demo down and kind of take it as far as I thought it could go, or sometimes not far enough. But then when I would FaceTime Trev, we'd be bouncing notes off of each other, and he'd be like, and the double kick thing, he was like, oh, dude, I love that. And I'm like, oh, great. Like, so this is going to swing in this band. And then like the more we did and the difference of songs, like I would know what to, if one song needed a lot of drum kind of moments, then I would really hone into that. And if some songs needed me to lay back, I would do the same. But it always was, we'd bounce notes off of each other. And then, if something, Trev was like, oh no, bring that back. Or, why don't you go full time here? Like or I'd have suggestions, like very collaborative in that way. And I definitely think it took, maybe a couple tunes for it to really, for me to go like, all right, well, let's try, let's see where this goes and see where this lands. And Trev was always receptive to all of it. And the great thing about working with him is he really pushed me to just go with my instinct and go with my gut. And because I'm a guy who really likes to sit with my drum parts for a while. I just like to consider myself to be a perfectionist in some ways. And I want to make sure that what I'm going to do is like what I'm okay with. If it's out in 30 years, like I still want to be cool with it. But Trev was like, dude, I want like literally pretty much all the songs, maybe except a couple. The day I wrote the drum part and the day we FaceTime and did that whole thing was the day I went and recorded the final take, like the day that I kind of worked on it, because he wanted me to capture that instinct and capture that whatever like magic that you get when you first responding to a track instead of overthinking and overcomplicating everything, which was a really unique approach. And by the end we really dialed it in. And but yeah, it obviously takes time. When you start creating with somebody, you're not going to be as comfortable, but then by the end it happened very quickly because he was so supportive of me as a drummer and what I brought to the table. And I was responding to his riffs in a way that I really I was connecting with the music. And yeah, pretty much from there, like everybody just does and brings so much of their own personality every step of the way.
That makes me think about, having listened to the songs, that it has this sense of looseness to it. It's not like, hey, we weren't Boston and did 128 takes and we're on the floor cutting tape apart, right? Splicing things in. It has that live feel, right? Like that you forget having done it in 4 separate studios. It just has that feel to it. And I think you guys captured it. And maybe for people watching who are in bands and are finding different creative ways, that might be the way to go to be able to give people freedom like that. And
it works with some bands and it works with, like comparing it, for example, to like Better Strangers, like, it's way more collaborative and like you have to be in the same room because you can't write a full song without feeding off the other person. Trev has a very good ability at just being able to map out what he thinks the song should do, but just with the guitar. I don't know if he's writing along a drum loop or something, but then when he sends it to me, like I get just the bare bones version. And so it's different kind of relationships to different musicians that, what works and what doesn't, and finding, what's worked with this band has been really fun.
It sounds like it's helped you grow as a musician as well.
Yeah, for sure. And, playing with different people, it always helps. And to me, just playing a kind of a different genre, not a different genre of what I've done before, but just more like something that's, just different in general. It's always fun for a drummer to be able to, for me, I've always spent the last kind of couple of years wearing different hats depending on what gigs I've got to play. It's like the mechanics role or the Genesis role or, my dad's role. Like, so I kind of approach it kind of the same way, but obviously being able to write and be involved in the process makes it more mine than it would just, me playing somebody else's songs. But it's always fun to kind of work with like different confines of what the bands need.
Yeah. Have you guys set a release date yet for the album?
Not yet. The album's fully finished. And we actually were just last week we were recording something which may be in addition to the record. We don't know yet, but it's definitely going to be coming out. The thing is right now we've got everything's done, the artwork's done, the mastering, whatever, mixing. It's just nowadays so much stuff gets released every day on on Spotify and whatever, that like you can just kind of be another drop in the ocean if you don't do it correctly. And I think everybody has put in a lot of work and into the album, and we believe that it should go out to as many people as possible. So we're trying to just currently wait for the right time and place to put it out, whether that's with a label, whether that's independently. We've got these big dates that are going to be announced for May, and then obviously in the summer we're going to be doing a European tour opening with Toto. So we're hoping like the buzz can kind of keep building where we can kind of release something on our terms, and but at the same time still going out to a mass of people because we believe the record should.
How many tracks do you have for the album?
So it's 10 tracks on the album, and we did an extra one, but we don't know if that'll be on the record or if that's a standalone single. But it's very exciting. What we just did is going to some big news that we'll have soon. But yeah, we finished that pretty much by December. But then as of last week, things change, and who knows if this new song will be on the record. But for the moment, it's 10 tracks that are finished already.
Now, you in another interview you did, you said that Toxic Envy is definitely your favorite drum track on the record. But if you look at the 10 tracks as a whole, right, and what you put into each of them, is there one that really stands out as just your favorite from an umbrella musical standpoint, just not drumming?
Yeah, it's always it's a different kind of thing between the drumming versus like the overall song. Yeah, but Toxic Envy, it probably was my favorite drum track just because it was like the one that I probably spent the most time on, and I the most thought out of like the intro and like the fills and like composing more of a part that I thought I've like as soon as I heard the idea that Trev sent me, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to spend some time on coming up with something that I think is cool. Um, as an overall song, Something Wrong was always a favorite at the beginning. I think there's a song that we haven't released yet called There Is No Doubt, which is more of a ballady song that was like the second song we wrote together, and I really enjoy playing that one, and I think it's a great tune. Um, you have different relationships to the songs. I think though probably a top three off the top of my head would be Something Wrong, Toxic Envy, and then There Is No Doubt. Maybe I'm forgetting another one on the record. We have another one called World Between Us that was near the end of the record, which that was a good one. And but the funny thing is that a lot of the songs grow on you in different ways, because when I get it, like I said, it's just a bare bones version, and I may be like, oh, this is okay, or this is cool, but like, let's see where it goes. And then all of a sudden, every time I hear something new, whether that's Trev's guitar parts or Steve's parts or Emmett's top line, and then it's like, you get to hear it as a listener every time. And then by the end, you're like, oh my God, this song is amazing. And like, I didn't think it was going to get to this point. Not that like there's ever been a song that I didn't, like at the beginning. I just mean more, you don't know where it's going to go vocally. And that just brings it to a whole other level.
So you mentioned that you're hitting the road. You're going to be opening, I guess, for this slightly known band Toto. I guess people should really get into them, I guess. And in Europe, what about in the States? What can we expect to see? Are you planning a big tour for the States? Are you going to be,
We're planning
rounded about?
Yeah, there's no like huge tour at the moment. There is a tour that we're going to be doing in May, but we're going to be opening for Billy Idol for a couple shows in the U.S. Kind of mainly like Midwest kind of stuff. No, so we're looking forward to that. That's like we're doing like some Arizona dates, like Oklahoma.
You recently posted about your kit, right? And questioning, too many toms. First off, are there ever too many toms? That's number one. But what thought do you put into the design of your kit for performing, and what kind of kit are you going to take on the road?
Yeah, well, I definitely would say I don't have a small kit. The kit that I'm using with the effect is actually, well, you would know it's the kit that I used with the Mechanics, the purple kit, but with 2 added concert toms. Just because that's like in the songs and kind of part of the family crest. That I've always thrown them into the kit as well. So that's it's pretty much the core of the kit that I'm always kind of using. The photo I posted is like the kit that I have at Brain Damage Studios in Miami, and it's also the kit that I use with Better Strangers, which is a bit more of like the prog kit. So it's bigger, has more drums and more kind of colors that you can take from, especially when writing. But with the effect, it's I don't need like the rototoms or the extra splashes or the stack and stuff, especially since we've got some tracks going through Ableton, so the electronics I don't need to worry about. But it's still a pretty big kit. It's definitely not a fun load in, but it makes it worth it during the show. But it's it's always inspired by a bunch of different drummers and different eras and cycles that I go through of like what I want out of the kit and the way I want to set it up. It's been pretty much the same for probably the last 2 years, I'd say. But it's always kind of evolving depending on what I'm into and what I want out of it. But it's got definitely a bunch of different influences that go into the way I set it up.
Well, yeah, that's a good lead into the next question I have, and I'm talking music, not just drumming here, but who are some of your biggest musical influences, and how have they kind of shaped your style and approach to your music and your drumming?
Yeah, there's so many, man. I mean, like as far as like drummers, like other than my dad, it was John Bonham, Danny Carey, Taylor Hawkins, Abe Cunningham, John Theodore. Like, there's so many of these drummers and different bands. I think it's also dependent on like what you'll hear the influences more on like what's appropriate for the band. Especially like Danny Carey and Tool are such a big influence of mine, but obviously that approach to songwriting isn't necessarily the same as like the effect necessarily. But at least drumming wise, there's plenty of licks and stuff that I'm taking from Danny and different guys like that, more the prog guys, John Theodore from Mars Volta and stuff. But then as while being as influenced by them, I'm just as influenced by guys like Stuart Copeland or Jeff Porcaro. I take a huge Jeff approach when working. It's funnily enough working with Trev. I take a Jeff Porcaro approach to it, but just because that's very the mentality of like do what's right for the song, and like the song comes first, and being able to kind of hold the pocket down. So there's so many. It's like I as much as I'm influenced by like the rock and metal guys, I also really love some of the fusion guys, Billy Cobham, or even current guys like Larnell Lewis from Snarky Puppy and stuff. Like I always think that's like so important for any drummer or just musician, is like always kind of trying to broaden and expand your musical palette and who you listen to, and because the combining stuff from like the metal world to also the jazz world, because like ends up being a really interesting combination. So that's kind of how I look at it. I'm always trying to get into different drummers and bands.
So you've had an opportunity to perform with some incredible legendary musicians, and you're really kind of you're still in the early stages of what's going to probably be a very long, prosperous career. Is there anyone that you think of today, but wow, if I could collaborate with them, if I had a chance to get in a room and make some music, is there like one person that you'd really love to work with that you haven't had a chance to yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think I always look at like singers. Like I've always wanted to play on a song with Chino from the Deftones singing. I just love his voice, and like his writing is just great. That was always like at the top of my list. And actually, funnily enough, Maynard too from Tool, I would love to do something with him, because I just think both of those guys just so unique and creative with like the way they write and record their vocals. Like it's really awesome. But those are kind of the main two that kind of come to mind. I mean, there's always guys that you're like, oh, it would be awesome to like do something with Flea or something like that. That'd be great too. But yeah, I would say those two were probably the first ones that come to mind.
Oh, that's great. Well, hey, maybe they'll catch this video and you get a chance, right?
Hey, I'm more than happy. Hit me on Instagram or something.
Here's something interesting, and it's a little more personal, but many musicians don't get a chance to perform, not only in one band with their dad, but two, right? Like
Mhm.
that experience, what did it feel like or mean to you to have that opportunity, and how do you think that experience is going to impact the rest of your career?
Oh, totally. I mean, it had a huge impact. I mean, in different ways. Like my dad's tour was just like probably the most important thing that's ever happened to me musically. It just completely changed like the way I approached, the professionalism of music, and you know, I grew up doing that tour. Like I started that tour or rehearsals like from 15. The tour started I was 16, but I would consider from 15 years old until I was 18, that tour was my life. You know what I mean? Of like going out and doing it. And so you're not only growing as a musician, but you're growing as a human too. And started it off as a kid and became an adult by the end of the tour. And, it taught me so much of this, like, priceless, education and information from being able to see like not only how to handle yourself at that level, because you're playing at like arenas and stadiums, which is usually the finish line for most bands. and you're starting off at that point, and you really learn quickly like the do's and don'ts of the industry, and like, you know, the discipline and the professionalism that has to be shown. um you know, so as far as like drumming and as a person, like it changed me. But obviously, you know, being able to share those moments with my dad, that's something as I've gotten older that I've, you know, as a kid, you're just stoked to be playing music, you know, you don't care. And now I'm like, wow, like, you know, it really, I cherish those memories and I'll cherish those forever, you know, to be able to share that with my dad. And, you know, eventually with Genesis, like his last ever shows, you know, to be a part of that with for him, and to be a part of that with Genesis, which, you know, not only am I a fan, you know, was in the band, but I'm a fan of the band. You know what I mean? More so, you know, I was honored that they asked me to play drums on that last tour. But, you know, above all else, I just love the music. And so to not only be a part of their last kind of lap around the field, but also to be able to be a part of like, you know, and see like the relationship that my dad has with Mike and Tony. And that's a friendship that dates like 50 plus years. You know what I mean? Like it's so special to be able to see that, and to have been a part of it is, you know, something I'll definitely never forget. And, you know, it's had a huge impact, not only for my career, and it's helped me, and it has opened a lot of doors, which I'm, you know, always will be grateful for. It's also just like been just huge for me as a person to be able to live through that, and the learning experiences that I've gotten from it are just like, you know, have been unlike anything else.
Other than the effect, which everybody should be listening to right now. I mean, if you're not listening to this interview, you should. Who are three artists that you may be jamming out to lately, known, unknown, whatever, that you that are having an impact on you that you really like, that you think maybe other people would enjoy listening to?
Yeah, I'm well. So I mean, because, you know, there's tons of bands. Right now, I'll say there's a band that definitely does not get enough credit as they should. It's a band called Carnival. They're out of Australia. They're like a kind of a progressive hard rock band, and they, you know, they just nearly don't get enough recognition that they do. And they've had such a huge impact on me, and like songwriting and just parts. And, you know, I've always, that's kind of been what I've been jamming like the last almost year or two. Um, I'm trying to think of who else, because obviously, you know, everybody knows I love bands like Tool and Mars Volta, and we talked about those bands. But I'm trying to think of kind of more obscure bands. I really started listening to this band called Night Verses, which is a kind of instrumental three piece, which is Eric Improda, who's like this great drummer who's been around for a while. He played with like um, has played with a bunch of different bands, but his band and the music they write has really kind of been kind of on the playlist recently. Um, and I'm trying to think of another one. Let me quickly. I'm checking my
I'll,
Spotify recently played.
I'll give you one to add to your Spotify if you hadn't heard of them. There's a band called Kid Capici. Have you heard of them?
No, I have not.
Oh, it's like a combination of like the Clash in energy with the lyrical sense of madness and some ska. They actually just released a song with Suggs, but I have had them on repeat all through their albums. I saw
Oh,
them opening
nice.
for they opened up for Nothing But Thieves, and they are incredible.
Oh, I love Nothing But Thieves. I mean, I've been a fan of theirs for like a couple years now, so I'll definitely check them out. Kid
Yeah,
Capici is what that was what you said.
yeah, Kid Capici. Yeah.
Nice.
Uh,
Okay, so the other band, I'm just going off like my most recently liked songs, and I haven't. It's more like I've been into them for longer, but I guess Perfect Circle. They're pretty well known. They're on tour now, but that was just the other. I'm just going through my liked songs and seeing what came up, and I was like, oh, Perfect Circle. I've been jamming lately.
it's kind of like you listen and then oh, wait a minute. I got number one. What were number three and four? But that's awesome. You've got an eclectic taste, which I think also shows in the style of your play. You're not just you're just not hitting the drums hard. You've got real style to your play.
Oh, thank you.
But let me ask, if you hadn't been, if this drumming thing and the music thing hadn't worked out, what was plan B? What'd you want to be with yourself?
I wanted to be a soccer player. I or and if I wasn't, which I realized it was not good enough to play soccer. That was my brother took that. You know what I mean? He's the soccer guy. But I think working in sport in some way, that's probably like my second love is soccer. And it wouldn't have been if it wasn't playing. I would have tried coaching, and if it wasn't coaching, I would have tried being like one of those TV pundits and just like or commentator or something. I just wanted to work, and I still still, and lose countless hours every weekend, getting depressed because my team sucks. You know what I mean? Like, so that was probably what I would do, would work in sport, if it wasn't music. But thank
Well,
God, because I'm not very good at it. So thank God the music thing.
hopefully, when you talk about your team, it's your brother's team. Is it?
Well, I wasn't, but yes, that too. He's doing okay. He's doing well. I was more talking about my beloved Manchester United, which
Uh,
are having a good time.
yeah. Hey, let's get to Better Strangers. Let's make sure they get a plug here. What's going on with them? Are you still looking for a new lead singer? And if so, how does somebody apply?
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we parted ways with our singer Ricky last year, but we're still very much active. We get together multiple times a week, and we're working on this next batch of material, which will become the next album. We're very much in the middle of that. It's just, yeah, we don't have a singer, which kind of become the story of our lives at this point. It's, we've been through it quite a bit, but we're definitely at this point trying to find the right person, because we want this next person to be the last person. And it's just like, we can finally kind of do it. We've got a lot of cool things in the works and people that are on board, that have been helping us. Then, so it's just about finding like the right fit and being able to finally really do it. As far as like applying, our Instagram, like, send us a message on Instagram and we'll get back to you. And it's been, we've had a lot of, interest in people and a lot of really solid leads. So it's been really good. But yeah, we don't want to rush it. We just want to make sure that we do it correctly and do it right. But, things are moving, and, the material that we're writing now, it's like, we're really excited about. And I think we finally really been able to hone in onto like our sound. And, me, Yang, and Joey, I mean, we've grown up together and been playing music together for so long that we've gotten to a point now where we have really dialed something that we're super proud of. And my test is always like, how long can you stay interested in a song, like just wanting to play it? And that's kind of what is the test. And, it's gotten to the point where we've got some songs that have probably been written even a year or two ago that we still feel really strongly about. And to me, that's a good thing. That's a good sign that like we're dialing in more what makes us, what makes us us. So, looking forward to being able to finally be able to kind of get that back on its feet.
Now, there's a band that you may be aware of in musical history that once lost their lead singer, and the drummer came out from behind the kit and
Really,
said
I've never
lead
heard that
fans.
before. I've never. I,
Well, look, again, that's another one of those internet rumors, right? Any chance that you have any aspiration to get beyond drumming at some point and have that type of career like your dad did?
Not at the moment. I can't say I didn't try. Like, I did try with Better Strangers, and it's just, like, at the end of the day, I'm a drummer. More so, I don't want to be a singer. If I ever was, it was more out of necessity than it was out of desire. But I just don't consider myself having a lead singer voice. I do some backing vocal stuff, and I can quote unquote sing, but I wouldn't say I would put myself someone who has a lead voice. I think it's also, just depends on the relationship that you have. Like, I think I'm too attached to playing drums in that band that I would want to be the singer. You know what I mean? Um, but it's funny, on Instagram, it's like you'll get people who are like, "Why don't one of you guys give it a shot?" And it's like, we've tried that, obviously. Like, you don't think that was the first thing we tried? You know what I mean? Because that would make things easier. But it wasn't to be. So we're still looking for the right person.
Well, I think your dad did it reluctantly after trying out a bunch of lead singers. So you never know. You could have a change of heart. But hey, Nic,
Yeah.
we've spent a lot of good time together today. I'm so excited for what you're working on, and I know people out there are really looking forward to more releases. Definitely getting a chance to see you live. So thanks for spending some time together today.
Of course, man. Thank you so much for having me, and great conversation and great questions as always, man.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.